My uncle didn't want to make me a partner in the family business and chose his inexperienced son instead, but the competition has hired me, and now I'm a traitor to them. Hello, I'm a 30-year-old woman, and recently my family has sidelined me for leaving the family business and standing up to my uncle, who is retiring this year. I'm here to ask if I'm in the wrong. To put it in context, my dad, who would have turned 63 this year, had two younger brothers, Brian, 59, and Scott, 56. All of them inherited the real estate business from my grandfather. My grandfather expected the three brothers to run the place as co-owners, and everything would be fine. However, 6 years after my grandfather retired, my uncle Scott decided to split from the business and start his own. With that, he was also cut off from the family, as no one liked his decision to compete with his own brothers in the business. For the last 16 years, no one in the family has spoken to him. They don't even acknowledge his existence. They pretend he was never part of the family. I had learned to do the same. Anyway, my dad passed away 3 years ago due to double kidney failure. His health wasn't good even before that, and he had been training me to take over in case he ended up bedridden. Obviously, no one expected him to die, but it was good that I was prepared to take on his responsibilities and handle the duties he had in the company. Not only had I been doing his job and helping my uncle Brian run the company for the past 3 years, but since I graduated from business school, I had been working with my dad and uncle to learn everything because I eventually hoped to become a partner in the business. It's been almost 9 years since I started working there, and I obviously expected to eventually be made a partner in the company, as that's what my dad wanted. However, about 10 days ago, I found out that my uncle had decided to make his son a partner and that I would remain in the position of CFO. When my dad was alive, he was the CEO and my uncle was the CFO. After his death, my uncle took over as CEO and I was promoted to CFO. Now, if someone was supposed to take my uncle's place because he's retiring in a couple of years, shouldn't it be me? My cousin Dean wasn't even in the picture, so this decision really took me by surprise. He's 23 years old and just graduated a year ago. He has a degree in economics, but no practical knowledge or experience. More than anything, he's too young to be a partner in the company. He hasn't paid his dues, and I know for sure he doesn't deserve it more than I do. Naturally, I was very upset when I found out about this. I didn't even find out directly from my uncle. It was my mom who told me that she had just heard from her sister-in-law, Dean's mom, that I had turned down the opportunity to be a partner in the company, and that's why my uncle was offering it to Dean. When my mom told me this, I instantly called my uncle, because we hadn't had any conversation about it, and I thought it was a joke. But when we talked on the phone, he told me he was seriously considering making Dean the CEO of the company and a partner in the firm, because he was going to announce his retirement in a couple of months. I was in shock and reminded him that Dean hadn't worked a single day in his life until now. He had spent the entire last year finding himself and exploring, so he was pretty inexperienced and definitely not up to the job. Then my uncle told me that, apparently, that's where I come in because, since I'll be mentoring him, he won't have anything to worry about. It's not that they don't need me in the company anymore. He still needs me to handle everything while Dean gets accustomed, and I would still be the CFO of the company. But I didn't agree with that. I told him I had worked very hard for the past 9 years and wanted the respect I deserved. Dean definitely didn't deserve this position, and I made it very clear that I wasn't happy with this decision. I told him that if he decided to make Dean a partner in the firm and CEO, then I would resign from my position and leave the company. My uncle tried to tell me I was overreacting, that he was only doing this to secure Dean's future because he wouldn't settle for anything less than the CEO position. He didn't want him to separate from the company like Uncle Scott did, so this was his only option, and he hoped I would understand. He even tried to reassure me by saying that Dean would only be the nominal head of the company, but that I would really be in charge, and he knew that even Dean would respect me. I tried to negotiate with him. I told him I would be willing to settle for my CFO position, but I wanted him to make me a partner in the company. He said he didn't know if he could do that since he had to talk to Dean first, but I didn't care. I had done the work and wanted to be CEO and a partner, or at least just a partner. He could do that, or I would leave. It was an ultimatum. When my uncle and I ended up arguing about this, he finally told me that we live in a free country, so I could do what I wanted, but his decision was already made. He'd also discussed this with the board members, and in a few days he would make his announcement. His decision was already made, and I could accept it or leave, as I had said. It was a horrible day for me, realizing exactly where I stood with my uncle because I always thought we had a good relationship. Clearly, when it came to our relationship in a professional capacity, I had overestimated how close we were. It's not surprising either. Dean has always been quite spoiled, and I'm not surprised that my uncle chose him over me. This is his flesh and blood, so of course, I could never compete. Anyway, I was very upset about how things turned out, and my mom had suggested that I even look for a lawyer and sue them legally. But I didn't want to do that. Instead, I had a better plan in mind that would really make them angry. I guess most of you could figure out what I did next, but for those who don't know yet, I emailed my Uncle Scott that same day. I briefly told him everything that had happened and said I would be willing to work for him now if he accepted me. I didn't feel like sitting around mourning what I had lost. The only thing on my mind was getting back at my uncle, so I didn't think twice before contacting Uncle Scott. In less than 24 hours, I had a response from him. He said he was willing to offer me the CFO position and would be open to promoting me to CEO in a couple of years after his retirement. He had accepted my terms of making me a partner in the company since I was willing to tell him everything I knew about my company to help him. So a few days ago, we finally met in person, and it was a pretty fun meeting. I only had to distance myself from him because my parents and the rest of my family demanded it. But aside from that, I never had a bad relationship with my Uncle Scott. In fact, he was always the fun uncle, and until I was 15, he and I were pretty close. But then the fight happened, and he was excluded, and I couldn't talk to him again until now. When I was younger, they never told me exactly what led to my Uncle Scott being separated from the family, and even now, when I saw him, he refused to talk about it. But that was his choice, and I needed to respect it. However, he told me he was surprised that my Uncle Brian had done something like this, because when my dad was alive, he wouldn't have dared to try something like that. Anyway, he was happy because it worked in his favor, and he said he'd love to have me on board. He had only heard good things about me. Since they were our closest competitors, they had been keeping an eye on us and our operations. He said he knew what I had done for the company was quite significant and was looking forward to having me on his side this time. He also assured me that, unlike Uncle Brian, he didn't have any children, so I didn't have to worry about that aspect. We wrapped everything up, and I submitted my resignation that same day. Uncle Brian didn't seem affected in the slightest by the fact that I resigned. I sent him a formal message to inform him that I wouldn't be coming in for the next 2 weeks, since he had made it very clear that the company would be fine without me. He told me that was fine and that he already had replacements ready, so I didn't need to worry about my position. That was it. I didn't interact with him after that. However, yesterday, Uncle Scott and I finally posted a picture together to celebrate the fact that I was joining him. I went out to dinner with the team to meet some of the senior executives of his company and socialize with them before starting work. To say that my family is literally falling apart would be an understatement, because since I made the post last night, I've been bombarded with text messages, voice messages, and phone calls. Obviously, I haven't responded to anyone, but I can tell that people are very upset. Uncle Brian is furious and has already labeled me a traitor, telling me that he'll make sure I suffer the consequences of this move. He can try whatever he wants. I've also been condemned by many other family members, which I find strange because from the messages they sent, it seems they already know I did all this just because they didn't let me become a partner in the firm and overlooked me in favor of Dean. If they didn't speak up about the injustice of what they were doing to me back then, they have no right to criticize me now. The only opinion that really matters to me is my mother's. When I spoke to her this morning, she didn't seem happy with my decision either. That really surprised me because a few days ago, she had been urging me to see a lawyer to get what was rightfully mine. But now she thinks I'm going too far. She told me there's a lot of history with my Uncle Scott that I simply don't know, and she doesn't think it's appropriate for me to know either. That was pretty frustrating because if they're not going to tell me exactly why Uncle Scott was excluded from the family, I don't think I can decide whether I can trust him or not. I'm an adult woman, so I think I can handle the truth, and they don't need to protect me. So far from his behavior, he's been very kind to me, and I don't see any reason to cut ties with him. But anyway, my mom said the family was very upset with me, and she herself wasn't happy with this either. But if I had already made a decision, there was very little she could do to change it. I tried to talk to her, but she just hung up and said she needed to process what was going on. Now I have incredibly mixed feelings about what's happening. Am I the bad one for joining our competitors after my uncle refused to make me a partner in the company and chose his son over me? Edit. Hi. Some people were confused about how I got the job at Uncle Scott's company so quickly. Well, it was actually pure luck. His CFO was retiring in a couple of months anyway, and he had been looking for someone to replace him. Luckily, I sent him an email at the right time, so that's how I got this opportunity. It's like the stars and planets aligned for me here too. Also, some of you wanted to know how things were with my Uncle Scott before he was excluded from the family. Honestly, things were never really that bad when I was little. My dad, Uncle Brian, and Uncle Scott were always very close from what I had seen. I knew they had a big fight, and that's why Uncle Scott decided to leave the company and start his own business. But to this day, I really don't know what it was about. No one wants to talk about it, so I can't give you that information since I don't have it myself. However, my relationship with him was always good, and I think I mentioned that in my original post too. Even now, when I reached out to him by writing that email, his response was very cordial and warm. Honestly, I don't know why my family has such a terrible opinion of him. They've called him everything, referring to him as cunning, narcissistic, selfish, and other things. But every time I've interacted with him, I've never felt he was any of those things. I'm very confused about who to believe. I really don't want to make a mistake again by trusting someone because I trusted my Uncle Brian, and look where that got me. I don't want the same thing to happen with Uncle Scott either, so I need to be extra careful with these things. And since my mom isn't exactly happy with me right now, I really don't know who to turn to for advice. I can't talk to my friends about this because it's too personal and complicated. Update 1. It's been 3 days since people found out I was going to work with Uncle Scott. After the initial reaction, people have simply stopped talking to me. I guess that's fair. Now that I'm associated with Uncle Scott, they're treating me the same way they've treated him. Honestly, I still have no idea what happened between them all those years ago, but I've already chosen which side I want to be on, and I can't go back. To be honest, the history of their relationship doesn't even matter to me. It's not like I can quit and go back to working with Uncle Brian now. I need a job to support myself and the lifestyle I've gotten used to, and I need a lot of money, obviously. So, whatever it is, I'm here now, and I'm going to make the most of my situation. I talked to Uncle Scott about how the family was treating me, as if I were an outcast. He seemed very sad but told me that this was exactly what happened to him. He said that over time, I would get over it too. Maybe I'll even be luckier than he was since I'm from a younger generation, and they might contact me in time. But until then, I just have to hold on and deal with it. Once again, I asked him what had happened that led to all of this, but he refused to talk about it. My mother still isn't speaking to me, which is what hurts me the most. I've been texting her every day, and I haven't received a response so far. I'm going to be really busy with work in the coming days because I just started here, and there's a lot of work I need to catch up on now. If she wants to talk to me, she can send me a message herself. But other than that, I'm not going to try to contact her anymore. Update 2. It's been 6 days since I started working with Uncle Scott, and things have been going pretty well. The paperwork to make me a partner in the company is still being processed, but I trust him implicitly. He has treated me with nothing but warmth and respect. So far, I even feel more comfortable than I did at my previous company. I guess I have to say that everyone in my family was wrong about him. He has been very transparent with me about everything that's going on. He told me that, unlike my previous company, they aren't a private company, so he'll have to get the board of directors to approve everything regarding me before he can finalize everything. But he told me not to worry because, as the owner and CEO, it's just a formality, and I have nothing to be concerned about. Since I've already met most of the people associated with the company, and they all seem to like me a lot, they know my previous work and know I'm worth it. So, as Uncle Scott told me, I'm not too worried about this situation, and I'm going to focus on working. Things on the work front are going pretty well for me, but my personal life is a mess right now. To be honest, my mother and I haven't spoken since that last conversation, and I can't even count how many days have passed since then. I've felt really alone. No one else in the family has spoken to me either, and it's hard, but I'm trying to deal with it. I still have some friends from Uncle Brian's company, and they've kept me informed about what's going on. Apparently, they've already announced that I left, but they didn't include the fact that I left to work with Uncle Scott. Probably because it wouldn't reflect well on the company that someone in a position like mine left to work with their direct competitors. They also announced that Dean would take over as CEO in a couple of months, after Uncle Brian retires, and that he would also become a partner in the company. They're organizing a work party in his honor in a few days, As for the CFO position that became vacant when I left, it's being filled by one of the employees who always had issues with me. They probably did that on purpose just to annoy me. However, it just made me feel sad for them. If that employee had problems with me, I'm pretty sure they'll have problems with them in the future too. But that's a problem they'll have to deal with now. Anyway, I talked to my friends at the company and told them they were free to join me with Uncle Scott now, as we could offer them better salaries. Ultimately, it's up to them, but I can tell that some of them really want to work with me because they're not too confident about the changes happening in the company, and they think it would be better for them to leave while they still can. So I made the offer. Let's see who switches sides. Update 3. It's been almost a month since I started working with Uncle Scott, and things have gone very well. I'm now officially the CFO and also a partner in the company. I'm quite happy about it, and although my mother still isn't speaking to me, I think I've moved on. There's also some more good news. Some of my friends from my previous company have resigned from their jobs and applied here so they can work with me. Uncle Scott is quite pleased with that. However, Uncle Brian found this move even more annoying. A few days ago, after nearly 4 employees resigned to join us, he showed up at my house with Dean. I had just gotten home when the doorbell started ringing. When I saw that it was them, I spoke to them through the intercom. I told them to leave because I didn't want to have any conversation with them about anything. I knew they were here to discuss the fact that I had talked to a couple of employees and influenced their decision to join me. But I told them that I neither forced nor coerced them. They made this decision on their own. I knew they wanted an excuse to blame me, but even they knew it wasn't my fault. Uncle Brian was out of control and started yelling at me from outside the door, saying that I was stealing employees from them and that it wasn't fair. He threatened to take legal action against me for manipulating their employees. I'm pretty sure that's not grounds for a lawsuit, but I just let him yell until he ran out of voice because I knew there was no point in saying anything while he was shouting so loudly that he couldn't even hear me. When he finally seemed out of breath, I told him I wanted them to leave. Otherwise, I would be forced to call the police. With so many people leaving the company, I'm pretty sure they didn't want more people to leave, citing the fact that they seemed mentally unstable. When I said that, Dean suddenly chimed in and said that this wasn't the way to behave with someone who had been there for me for so long after my father passed away. He called me insensitive and selfish, saying that I had no respect for what his father had done for my family. I found all of that very pompous and ridiculous. I told him that I respected Uncle Brian as much as he respected me. I also reminded him that my father had worked very hard to bring this company to where it is now, and after his passing, I had also put in a lot of effort. The only person who had never done anything was Dean, so he had no right to be here talking this way. At least Uncle Brian deserved to be where he is now, but Dean was simply given his position as a form of charity because Uncle Brian didn't want him to leave the company and work elsewhere since it was a family business. Then I went on to tell him exactly what Uncle Brian had told me when he said he was offering the CEO position to Dean because his son wanted it and wouldn't settle for less. In my original post, you might remember that I mentioned how Uncle told me that the only reason he was offering the position to Dean and not to me was that his son wanted it. Even though he knew I deserved it more, he wanted to spoil his son. He also said that Din would only be the nominal head, but I would actually be running things. I remembered this clearly and mentioned it to Din, so he would know exactly where he stood with his father. Then there was silence. I heard them arguing quietly, and then I heard their footsteps walking away and out of the driveway. So, my job was done. Now the two of them could work it out between themselves, but at least they would leave me alone. The next day, I woke up to find that both of them had blocked me, and that made me very happy. Anyway, life is getting better now. I know that everything happening now would have upset my dad a lot, but at least I have the satisfaction of knowing that none of this was my fault. Uncle Brian got greedy and kicked me out, so if there's anyone to blame for the situation, it's him. I'm very sure about that now, so no one else can try to make me feel guilty and doubt myself. The only person I still hold hope for is my mother. I really hope that eventually she will change her mind because we've always had a great relationship. Especially after my dad passed away, we started bonding even more. I really miss her every day and keep thinking that maybe she'll eventually send me a message. But so far, I haven't had that luck. At least she hasn't blocked me yet, so maybe she's keeping the door open. I might try reaching out to her if I start missing her too much, but for now, I'm still trying to figure out what to do. Update 4. Almost 6 months have passed since my last update, and many things have changed. To start, Uncle Brian has officially retired, and Din has taken over the company. So far, he's only maintained the status quo and hasn't done anything different. Maybe things will work out for them after all, but I barely care. Since then, many employees who used to work there have joined us, and I'm very happy about that because I can see many familiar faces in my new company. My mother and I still haven't spoken, but I finally might have a reason for that now. A few weeks ago, I was having dinner and drinks with Uncle Scott and his wife. After a while, my aunt left the room to rest, and while we were talking, I finally asked him, since I'm now quite grown up and we're working together, I felt I really needed to know what had happened between him and the family that led to him being cut off. He finally told me. Years ago, my mother tried to have an affair with him. On Thanksgiving, which was being held at our house, she asked him to help her in the kitchen. He followed her without any idea of what was going to happen. Once they were alone in the kitchen, she told him she wanted to take things further with him, and although she was married to my dad, she had always had her eye on him. He tried to back away from her, and just in time, my dad walked into the kitchen and caught the two of them very close. My mom went crazy and started accusing him of trying to start something with her. I don't remember this because Dean and I were in our rooms, but my dad lost his temper and kicked him out of the house that day. Later, I was told that Uncle Scott had to leave because he had an emergency at work. However, after that day, my mom made up a bunch of lies to cover up this incident so that no one would believe him. She even told Uncle Brian and my dad that he had been planning to steal money from the company and start something on his own. My dad and Uncle Brian confronted him about it later and told him they would ruin him if he didn't step aside on his own. So, he decided to leave the company and started his own business. Since then, he hasn't had anything to do with the family. After finding out all this, I decided that it would be better to follow in his footsteps and have nothing to do with my family either. It was really sad to discover this about my mom, but it is what it is. I've accepted the facts, and this is my life now. Update 5. I'm back with more news about my situation, to tell you how my life has been over the past 8 months. To start, I haven't had any contact with my mother, whom I have blocked, so if she has tried to message or call me, I wouldn't know. But she hasn't tried to reach out through any other means. She knows where I live, so she could have come whenever she wanted, but I guess she must be a bit ashamed that I know the truth, which makes her seem more guilty in my opinion, but it's better this way. As for my job, it couldn't be going better. It was difficult at first to adapt to this new stage, but I finally feel more comfortable. It was a position similar to my old one, but it's hard to adapt to the nuances of another company. Not everything is done the same way. For now, I haven't been promoted to CEO, but that's okay. Not only do I earn more in this job, but I have more work than I had at my old company. This is because Uncle Brian's company, which is now headed by Din, has been losing clients and, well, ours has been absorbing them. This is due to Din's lack of experience, who, although he has a good education and attended a good university, there is a considerable distance from theory to practice. There's even a rumor in the industry that they might remove him from the position and bring in someone else to replace him. That someone is not going to be me, as I'm very comfortable in my new stage, although I don't think they would ask me either, as I'm a pariah to that family. But anyway, that's a bit of what's been happening in my life recently, at least work-wise. Personally, well, I still don't have much contact with my family, but I've gotten used to it.